I'm delighted to be sitting with Dr. Terence Teasdale, a very interesting writer and author, a very interesting man. He's written academic works, he's written fiction, and he's now written 2 books which are, to say the least, controversial and interesting. And one of them, or 2 of them, there are 2 books, sequels really, Controlled Women and Constipated Men, and Controlled Mothers and Damaged Daughters, both bound to raise some eyebrows. It's very nice to see you again.
Nice to see you, Geoffrey, thank you.
First of all, let's just look at the second title, Controlled Mother, let's look at both of them. Controlled Women, Constipated Men, Controlled Mothers and Damaged Daughters. It doesn't sound like a feminism book.
Well, many people would probably say it's anti-feminist, but of course that would be only one analysis. It would be the sort of analysis that feminists themselves would make, because they're subjectively one-minded people, and loggerheads with themselves and don't quite know what they are saying in terms of a collective voice. And so consequently, any person who regards himself a feminist would, even on the title, say that this is, in fact, an anti-feminist book. Of course, neither is.
Where did the idea come from? Tell me about the passion for writing a book.
I've been concerned very long time, certainly in my practices, where I've spent a lot of time on the psychiatric involvement of women in families, that families in fact are being demolished step by step, slowly. And we get political analyses as to why this is the case. I don't know of any study that, or suggestion has been brought up that, in fact, it's women, mothers, who are the problem. And so I thought it was about time that I, as a male, brought to the attention of the public at large that we start analysing what really is going on inside marriages, behind closed doors. It's been so very easy in the past to say, oh well, it's hormones, oh well, it's adolescence, oh well, it's the environment, oh well, it's the stressors and strains, oh well, oh well, oh well. But I don't know whether you, Geoffrey, have ever seen any report which has put the finger at women. Certainly, the finger's been put at men. And those arch feminists, starting from the 60s through to the second wave, are pointing at men and saying they're to blame for just about anything. And of course that's absurd. And so I decided that I would go back to my notes, clinical notes, and compile Controlled Women and Constipated Men. Now, controlled women, in effect, means women controlled by psychological disorders.
What kind of psychological disorders? Can we sort of broaden that, or in fact narrow that?
Specifically, we can talk about psychological problems such as neurosis, anxiety, narcissism, loss of attachment, things of those types of issues, depression, major depression, considerable anxiety. These negative emotions are combining to control women through their lives. And my analysis is, and my conclusion is, that the vast majority of women are suffering from psychological disorders. They'll never talk about it, they won't identify it. But that's the truth.
What is, in your view, what is a healthy woman?
A healthy woman psychologically is one who's forged a strong attachment with her mother. The first 3 years are most important in anyone's life, and every child needs a stake in the ground to feel comfortable and safe. And that stake, historically and properly, biologically, is the mother. Now, the daughter, or a son, who attaches in their first 3 years, has a sense of security. It allows them to go out, to experiment, and in trouble and danger, run back, even as a child, when they're threatened. Cling to their mother's breast, sit on their knee, get a hug, get a smile. These people grow up normally in the sense that they're not afflicted by, and hence their behaviour is not driven by these negative emotions that are so damaging. And so damaging that mothers not only damage themselves, but create enormous problems with their own daughters in particular.
So this is very interesting. What you're theorising or alleging is that we have a world virtually of damaged women
Yes.
who then project upon their daughters
Yes.
and create, without malice but by default, a sense of damage or neurosis or some psychic dysfunction. What do they do to boys? Are boys the winners in this?
Boys are the winners in this, in terms of, although depression generally is increasing in women at an alarming rate. That doesn't mean to say that boys or men don't suffer from depression, but it's growing particularly among women. And that's not surprising because of the whirligig we've just talked about. These psychological disorders are passed on from mother to daughter becomes adult, mother passes on to her daughter, and this dreadful cycle. Boys escape that. The bottom line is that women don't understand, mothers don't understand boys. The bottom line is that women don't understand men. If they did, they'd be able to communicate with men, but they can't because of their dreadful intensity, negative, intense emotions, if they're controlled, that drive their behaviour, drive them into unhappiness, drive them into a miserable life. Boys escape this. Boys, in many ways, think their mothers are crazy. I've heard that said so many times that I've had a patient with me, oh, they're crazy. My mum's crazy. It's not just one side of it. It's a regular comment. Crazy mothers. What they mean by that is that these are women who are psychologically disabled, that they're so negative. They understand their daughters terribly well, and that's who they lean on. That's who they turn to and against. They turn initially in their unhappiness, not to their husbands, but to other women who listen to them, or to women counsellors who use phrases like, I understand what you're saying, I hear what you're saying. And of course, being of that gender, they're part of it, absolutely part of it. And as the women age, they come to realise that what they've striven for all their lives, to be loved, is never going to. They want desperately to attach to a man. It will never happen. Women are afraid of aging. Age to women is like kryptonite to Superman in women, and they can't cope with it. So what happens is they turn to faking. They fashion their hair in such a way that takes hours and hours. They put lipstick on, they put makeup on, they have all sorts of jobs done to the face. They are faking their life in the aging process because only this starts giving them comfort, not humans. Boys escape it.
Are we talking primarily about families and women from Western nations, or is this a global statement?
That's a very important question, Jeffrey. I have not practiced clinically, but have observed significantly in Asian countries. I see, for example, that mothers operating in Asian countries are quite different from Western mothers. And even in the Western world, there are differences. I think of Australian mothers, I think of English mothers, I think of American mothers, I think of Northern European mothers who fit into this category. I think it would be lovely for somebody to do a study on Asian women and to see whether in fact they fall in line with this horrible business of being controlled all their lives by this negative emotion and this intensity. And this intensity is quite dreadful because men don't have this intensity. Men tend to walk away from conflict. They go to a garden shed to escape their wife. They don't want to be with their wife. Or they go out with their son to play sport or watch sport. But they will escape it. So the mother is left with this intensity. And who does she turn to? A daughter, screaming, raging, ranting, poisoning the daughter with guilt, shame, and anger. And of course, this daughter learns in the process to become anxious, and we know deep anxiety leads to neurosis, and then on top we get narcissism to cope with, in this dreadful way, their terrible life. And these women are terribly narcissistic as well.
Well, as we have this discussion, about 10 faces come into my mind of learned, marvellous friends of mine who are women and who are feminists. And it would be interesting to have them here today, perhaps, and perhaps not. What's your view of feminists? Do you get along with them? Do you support the intrinsic values of feminism? Do you view it as primarily a positive force in its at its core, or do you view it as something that is that has been damaging or counterproductive?
If you go back to the crude days of feminism in the mid-60s, the Germaine Greers of this world, who were espousing let's hate men, men are to blame for everything. And of course, in blaming, these feminists are using defense mechanisms to protect them from being hurt by the problems they themselves have. So isn't it better to put the blame on somebody else rather than on themselves? It's much easier because they eliminate the pain themselves. So feminism, as we know, started then. Then we've got the second wave, and then we have the third wave. If we had your 10 feminists here, well, we multiplied that by 10 and had 100.
There are more.
And there are more. And asked each one, what is feminism? You get 100 different answers. There are so many different subsections within feminism, all based on descriptive comments, nothing empirical, but hiding behind prejudice, hiding behind constant blaming of others, never analysing themselves, never helping transgender people. Did you know, for example, I'm sure you did, that feminists, ardent feminists, loathe transgender. They will always refer to the transgender as him, he. They won't accept that this person has chosen to be a woman. But they know best. Biologically, they're a woman. And there's no such thing as somebody who's a male becoming one, because that's really kowtowing to misogyny, they say. So they've got an excuse for just about everything. But the bottom line is they hate men. They blame men. But they never really analyse themselves. They never go inside themselves. They never look at feminists and see how daughters of their own gender, of course, are being so badly treated by controlled women. Now, do I dislike women? Feminists? Absolutely not. I have feminist friends. They call themselves feminists. But when you sit them down... and
I'd love to be at the dinner party, by the way.
But when you sit down and have a chat with them... I've got a gun somewhere. And have a chat with them, they tend to relax more. They don't really need a small audience, they need a large audience.
I think it sounds a very interesting book, and it's very nice to talk with you today. Thank you very much, Terence.
There's one thing I'd just like to say, Jeffrey,
Please
at the end. And I'm reminded of Voltaire, how are we going to get women and men to be right? And I recall Voltaire's words of, I don't want to be part or enter your world or share your world. Because if you know me, and you acknowledge what I've done and what I'm doing, you'll find space for me. And I think it's a wonderful way to lead one's life. And I hope all of us, including myself, can do that. So thank you very much, Jeff.
Thank you very much, and that's a lovely way to end today's talk. Dr. Terence Teasdale.
Thank you very much, Jeff.
Thank you, Terence.